Fallarbor by Salem. Years ago, my mother and father settled in an area far from civilization, choosing it mainly for its abundance of fossils they so loved. They built a modest wooden home and raised 2 children along with a thriving garden. The house rests on an outcrop in the sea of soft maroon rock that gently flows southward to Route 116. In the east, falling volcanic ash lays a white sheet over the landscape and dims the sun, providing a cool haven for the midday heat. In the southwest, dusk's amber rays filter down from the crevices of creamy rock and glitter off the cyan water of Meteor Falls. The northern sea mirrors the stars that my family and I watch at night. When I was young, the sight of a traveler passing by our house made me giddy with excitement. I found it interesting to see new people, the things they brought, and what they knew. A few years ago, one such traveler constructed a house to the right of us. We treated our neighbor, Mr. Wilton, well. My older brother, Elliot, and I greeted him with freshly baked goods made with the fruits from our garden. However, masked behind my actions was fear. That day I realized word of this beautiful area would spread. I knew that the way of life we loved would be disrupted. Last evening, construction workers moved in and set up their tents. Golden sunlight stung my tired eyes as I opened the bedroom door. I began walking to the bathroom and caught the smell of breakfast wafting from the kitchen. "Take a look outside," Elliot said as soon as he saw me. He was sitting at the table with pancakes and coffee in front of him. His long black hair matched the frames of his glasses. The days he mined with my father made him bulky, however recently he'd been mining less frequently. "Good morning to you too," I replied jokingly. I peered out of the window. My heart sank as the blinding white light focused into a fleet of heavy machinery. Another steel colossus roared to life, snapping me awake. "Sorry, man. Good morning. The sound of the damn things woke me up and I couldn't get back to sleep," he groaned. "What are they gonna build?" "Haven't asked," he replied, taking a sip of coffee. "You'd think they'd have notified us about it. Let's ask them after breakfast." After I'd taken a shower and eaten, we stepped outside and greeted my mother, who was pulling weeds out from the garden. We walked to the right of our house, making our way to the pile of materials and the beeping of trucks. Our feet made soft noises on the stone, sending small amounts of red dust into the crisp blue sky. "Hello?" Elliot called to a construction worker. "Morning. What can I do for you?" "Well, we've been wondering what you're building here. No one's told us about it." "Ah, jeez, that's terrible. I'll notify my boss about that. We must have slipped up." He gestured to the right of our neighbor's house. "Well, the battle tent and the Pokémon Center will be there." He moved his hand a little bit lower. "The mart will be there." He pointed to the far left of our house. "And there will be a few lakes over there, good for cooling off in. The construction should be finished in just a few weeks. Devin wants it completed quickly." "Why does Devin want to do this?" my brother asked. "Well, they've started devising this area as a resort location. They're calling it Fallarbor. This little place will have a decent population in a few years or so." "Alright, thanks," Elliot said with false enthusiasm. He was silent on the way home. "Where have you two been?" my father asked when we had arrived. His tall, well-built figure seemed too large for our small house. "We found out Devin is going to turn this into a resort town. They're building a battle tent, a lake, a mart, and the likes," I said flatly. My dad's face fell before he forced on a smile. "Ah, maybe you two can catch a Pokemon of your own if they're selling Pokeballs at the mart. If you need me, I'll be at Meteor Falls." My father had been mining fossils in Meteor Falls since before I was born. Fossils are rare encounters, even here, but when he found one, it made his month. His optimism picked me up, and we carried on with our day. It took me weeks, but I began to accept the inevitable and looked at the positives of the situation. The lakes were finished. Meteor Falls' rushing waters had made the job easy. It was a nice alternative to Route 113's volcanic ash. However, I'd been anticipating the day the mart would open. Elliot and I had never left the small area we called home. Everything we needed was here. As a result, we didn't have luxuries such as Pokeballs. It was mid-afternoon. Bluish-white light bled through the blinds and spilled onto the table that my brother and I were sitting at. A masquerade buzzed on the other side of the glass. "I'm going to get some Pokeballs at the mart and try and catch something. Want to come with me?" I asked. "Sure, I'll just watch," he replied. He still seemed down from the past few weeks. Our father entered the main room. "Good afternoon," my father said. "Your mother has fallen ill. Why don't you two make her some lunch?" What does she have?" Elliot demanded. I'm not sure. It's best not to worry about it. Her immune system is excellent after all, he replied. He must have been far more concerned than he was letting on. We entered our parents' room and set a tray of food on the bed. The air felt hot and heavy. Oh, thank you, she smiled. Her face seemed older, grayer. It was probably just the dim light. What's wrong? My brother asked, worried. It's just a fever, she said calmly. When was the last time you were sick? I can't even remember. No matter, you should leave lest you catch what I have. Alright, we know you'll get better, I said, leaving the room. We took our coats before exiting the house. I could see the foundations of the battle tent had been completed. Far up the path on Route 113, a new house was taking shape. The mart's glass door slid open as we approached. Thoroughly impressed, I walked to the counter. Welcome, how may I serve you? The cashier asked. Hello, I'll take 10 Pokeballs. Sorry, sir, we only sell Great Balls here. 10 will be 6,000 Poké-dollars. Interesting. 5 Great Balls, then, I said as I handed the cashier 3,000 Poké-dollars. Here you go. Thank you very much. Please come again. Thank you, I replied. We exited the mart. The low orange sun accentuated the frown on my brother's face. Before heading to Meteor Falls, we stopped by our neighbor's house. Hello, Mr. Wilton, I said. Well, hello, boys. What brings you here this fine day? He inquired, a light-hearted smile on his face. I was wondering if you'd lend me one of your Pokémon for a bit so I could catch my own. Well, certainly. Anything you need. It's great that you want to embark on such a quest, he said, handing me a Pokéball. Thank you very much. I'll be back soon, I said, exiting the house. Of course. Be sure to show me what you got, he called. We walked southwest along the white-maroon path, past the still blue lake and towards Meteor Falls. We put on our coats before entering the opening in the creamy rock. The cold, damp air was a refreshing contrast to that of the volcanoes. Copper in the rock had oxidized due to the waterfalls, turning parts of the stone a minty green. Drops of water echoed as they fell from the ceiling. We walked deeper into the cave and went down a floor. Almost no light filtered through. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I made out a Lunatone floating towards me. The red eyes encased in its luminescent rock body shone like rubies. Skarmory, Steel Wing, I commanded. Skarmory rammed its metal wing into the curve of Lunatone's stone body. Bright yellow sparks danced around in the darkness. The screech of steel on stone vibrated around the cave. One hit and the Luminos was dazed. I threw a Great Ball at it. After a few wobbles, the ball clicked shut. Huh, didn't think it'd be so easy, my brother said. Thanks. Are you sure you don't want to try? I'm good. Let's get out of here. We exited the cave, returned the Pokémon to the impressed Mr. Wilson, and walked home. It was late noon. The sky's teal-blue reflection in the lakes went well with the dusty red rocks that surrounded it. Welcome back, my father said. Hello, how's Mum doing? I asked. She's been in bed all day. She didn't eat her lunch either, he sighed. Anyway, what did you catch? I overheard you talking about catching a Pokémon. Lunatone. Mr. Wilton lent me a Skarmory. Great job, that's a good matchup. I can teach you a bit about Lunatone, he replied enthusiastically. I'll take you up on that, I said, smiling. I felt genuinely happy for the first time in weeks. Lunatone and I trained on Route 114 for the next 3 days. The dry heat exhausted both of us. To my family's great relief, my mother had recovered from her ailment. Today, Lunatone and I were strong enough to beat any Skarmory in the cool, grey shade of Route 113. Spinda, Slugma, and Sandshrew posed no threat. Happy with our achievements, I returned home and opened the door to find no one was in the main room. Suddenly, I heard a splatter followed by coughing from my parents' room. Inside, I found my father and Elliot. A pale, bony figure was convulsing over a bowl of dark, stringy blood and stomach fluids. Mother turned to look at me with sad, yellow-tinted eyes and sickly skin. My brother was completely still. My father was crying for the first time I had seen. His tears merged with the dark vomit that was splattered on his face. What happened? I asked shakily. We found her like this, just a few minutes ago. She seemed so well. It came back hard, somehow, my father replied, grasping for words. Please leave. I don't want any of you to catch this. I love you, my mother rasped. I brought her a clean bowl and water. Elliot wouldn't leave the room for a while, but he eventually gave in to her pleading. We called a doctor. He said we couldn't do anything but keep her hydrated and offer food. I had been training Lunatone for the majority of the day to keep my mind busy while I took care of my mother in the evening. The things I can't control seem to be the most painful. A week passed this way. My brother and I were playing chess this evening when we heard a horrible retching noise. We immediately rushed to my mother. The stringy black vomit in the bowl and on the sheets seemed to be greater than her body mass. "Go. Leave," she rasped between her convulsions. "We love you," I said weakly. "Get out," she cried. We left the room, unable to do anything. After a short time, the sounds of agony ceased along with her heart. It had no blood left to pump. I kept telling myself death was just unavoidable, a necessary end, but none of us could sleep that night. We buried her in the garden and mourned. As we silently piled the dirt back on her grave, I began to feel like I was burning up from the inside. My head and back throbbed. I collapsed into the dirt. The next few days were hell. Not because it felt like I was burning alive, but because I could make out the shape of Elliot in the bed next to me. I could do nothing but watch him and myself slowly die. My father brought us water and food. The day after, he didn't appear. A few people in bulky outfits helped us out from then on. Everything was blurry and dark. The air was thick and humid and the smell of sickness. My eyes were crusted shut. It felt like I was drowning in the putrid, molasses-like air. The next day, the veil of sickness was lifted from me. My muscles had wasted away. I struggled to bring my brother fresh food and water. When I entered my parents' room to aid my father, I found no one was there. Fresh, gristly, dark blood and waste covered the sheets. The rest of the room appeared to have been cleaned. Too exhausted to move anymore, I collapsed on the floor of the kitchen and slept. After a few lethargic, blurry days, my strength began to return, and Elliot's illness passed. Today we felt strong enough to walk. We stepped outside and the brightness blinded us for a few minutes. I realized we hadn't seen light for days. We walked to Mr. Wilson's house under the gray, early morning sky. Our garden was decaying from neglect, and the battle tent to the right of Mr. Wilton's house had been completed. "Hello, Mr. Wilton?" I called. "Oh, thank goodness you kids are all right," he said with relief. "Devin wouldn't let us leave our houses for the past few days. They said we would get deadly ill if we went outside. I heard about what happened to you. Thank God you're both alive. My prayers go out to your mother." "Thank you," I said, suppressing the memories. "Where is Devin now?" "I suppose they left just last night after telling me they had taken care of the problem. I shouldn't be speaking about it. They kept warning us not to." "My father isn't at our house. Do you know where he might be?" "Oh dear, no, I don't. I can help you boys look." "We'll do it ourselves," the brother replied. "Alright, let me know if you find him, would you?" "Of course. Thank you for the help," I said, exiting the house. Elliot's face was contorted with an expression of pure rage. We searched Route 113. The assistants in the glass workshop had seen Devin exit the town. He told us they had gone past his workshop in a rush when he was out, collecting ash. After finding all the townspeople that would talk knew more or less the same thing as Mr. Wilton, we head to Meteor Falls and ventured into the dim cave. My Lumatone illuminated an obscure, out-of-reach stalagmite at the base of the waterfall. It had pierced through my father's now frail, bony chest with ease. His yellow eyes were glazed over and bloodshot. The eager carnivorous stream pushed forward on his stubborn corpse. It wouldn't budge. The impatient water had already begun eroding its soft, yellowish skin. Elliot gagged, his face now a mix of rage and depression. We quickly made our way out of the cave, unable to recover the remains of our father. My brother isolated himself in the house for the next 2 months. I attempted to talk to him for the first few weeks, but he rarely responded. In the evening, I'd watch the television I recently purchased from the mart. One day after training on Route 113, I came home to find a tunnel about 20 feet deep was burrowed straight through the main room's wall into the maroon rock behind it. Elliot was inside. The Pokémon was next to him, making quick work of the soft rock. "What the hell is this?" I asked, dumbfounded as to why he would tear down the wall. "I'm mining for fossils," he replied, smiling. "All right," I said, still perplexed. I figured his way of dealing with the tragedy was to continue our father's legacy. At least he was happy now. All I had wanted for the past few months was to see him happy. I stopped myself before asking why he wasn't mining in Meteor Falls. "Where did you get that Pokémon?" "It's an Anorith." "I found its fossil." He gestured to a machine. A man dressed in red gave it to me in return for use of our father's dig TM. It can resurrect fossils. That's amazing, I said, awestruck. Yes, it is, isn't it? He replied. I tacked some boards around the entrance to hide the ripped wall. It didn't do much, possibly making it look worse than before. Later in the day, a white-haired boy entered our house looking for the man in red. The boy left after retrieving the dig TM from my brother. Elliot continued to excavate the cave. The cabin that encased the already plentiful rock collection my father had kept is now completely full. Fossils consumed more of his time with each passing day. He became secluded, not letting anyone into the cave, and not coming out. I began to fear talking to him as he snapped into a rage so easily. I started training on Route 115. 113 was no longer a challenge. Sounds of the deep, sparkling blue waves crashing into the crisp white sands merged with the cries of windgull. The tall white walls of Meteor Falls loomed over the lush forest that engulfed the route. Pokémon diversity there was amazing. It would keep my mind busy for some time. I returned home after another day on Route 115. As usual, Elliot was nowhere to be seen. However, the entrance to the chasm was completely covered with wooden planks. I shouted to him through the cracks in the boards. "Hey there, Sonny," a worker replied as he piled rocks into the cave. "That kid was digging here and had to leave. This here is a grade A safety hazard. We're filling it in." "Ah, do you know where he went?" I asked nervously. "Not a clue." My brother's love and joy had been destroyed. I needed to find him so we could talk, as he was probably an emotional wreck. I asked the townfolk, but no one had seen him. I searched for him until the sky turned royal purple streaked with amber. Feeling defeated and anxious, I returned home and lay down in my bed. Every day, I heard more reports of people disappearing. The new residents began to leave the town, and the steady stream of tourists dried up. The police furiously scoured every inch of Fallarbor for the missing, but no avail. The permanent residents began to lock themselves inside, but I had to continue searching for my brother. He was all I had left. I decided to go back into Meteor Falls. The police had already searched it twice, but I couldn't leave the well-being of my brother up to them. I got my jacket and stepped inside the cold, dark cave, with my Lumatone illuminating the way. Methodically, I checked every crevice of the slippery, gray stone. There was no remnants of my father. I thought I could still smell the fresh scent of decay, but convinced myself it was my imagination. We descended to the second floor. It was pitch dark and the air was hard to breathe. Lumatone was doing all it could to brighten the surroundings, but I could hardly see. I called for my brother, knowing was hopeless. As I stumbled into the darkness, a stalagmite caught my leg, and I plunged into the rapid, dark waters running through the cave. I grabbed for land desperately. Going over a waterfall here meant certain death, as I well knew. I caught hold of a rock and pulled myself onto the solid ground. I coughed out the swallowed water and took a deep breath of air. The smell of rot caused me to choke again. It couldn't be my imagination. The nervous Lumatone floated over to where I was, illuminating a tunnel. It was the only way to go. The fierce waters on the river surrounded the land I was on. As I made my way through the cramped tunnel, I saw a dim, artificial light emanating from the end of it. The stench of waste and decay was enough to make me feel lightheaded. Moans and garbled cries of agony echoed on the tunnel's damp walls. Silently, I looked around the corner at the end of the tunnel and froze, unable to look away. A bare light bulb was hanging from the ceiling, illuminating lumps of flesh and bone. Some had mouths, organs, limbs, and faces, but none were whole. The ones that could move were kept in makeshift cages. I looked around and recognized the features of townspeople that had disappeared. My father's deformed head laid on the ground, caved in as if it had sustained a heavy blow. Below the head it had a minuscule body whose skin was stretched thin to a breaking point by its oversized skeleton. I heard someone adjust a few knobs and press a button. A mechanical whirring filled the cave. My brother pulled out another mess of biomass from the fossil machine. It had my mother's features. He must have taken the bones from her grave. Its face was that of a child's. The body was fully developed but wrinkled. Its extremities were inverted, and the wet skin rippled as if it was trying desperately to get out. I couldn't help but throw up. Elliot turned around and looked me in the eyes. "Hello, brother," he said excitedly. "Why?" I stammered, at a loss for words. They destroyed Fallarbor and our family, he gestured to the moaning organisms. I used them to help bring mother and father back. They wanted to fix what they'd caused. My shock turned to fury. They did nothing. You destroyed and disgraced our parents. You can never bring them back, you fucking inhuman piece of shit. Elliot's face twisted into an expression of torment. He looked at his surroundings, then to me. His crazed, bulging eyes flashed to a look of horror and emptiness. We stared at each other. Tears silently rolled down his cheeks. My brother slowly turned around. We can try to fix this, my voice croaked. He wrenched his head down, shattering his skull on a dull stalagmite. Blinded by tears, I followed my Lumatone out through an exit tunnel that was connected to the room, carrying my brother's corpse. I hurried back to my house in a daze of confusion and desperation. Many days passed. Traumatized by what had happened to my family, I didn't talk to anyone for some time. Gradually, people gained enough confidence to return and enjoy Fallarbor. I associated too much pain with the town to stay there myself. However, before moving to Fortree, I needed to remove any reminders of what had occurred. I walked along the red path I knew so well. Gray smoke from the neighboring volcano billowed overhead. I entered Meteor Falls and made my way through, blocking out everything besides my task. I plunged into the black waters and powered through to the slimy ledge. My Lumatone used rock slide, collapsing the horrendous adjacent room and its entrances. We exited Meteor Falls and made our way out to the house. I repaired the broken wall, cleaned the rooms, and packed my belongings. Before departing, I removed my old sign from in front of my house that had been there for as long as I could remember. It read, Fossil Maniac's House. That was Fallarbor. Final thoughts? Absolutely fantastic. This story is so good that it's actually a bit hard to find a lot to say here about it. I'll take this opportunity to explain something to people who frequently say that I'm too negative. It's much easier to talk at length about what was done wrong rather than what was done right. When something is done wrong, I can explain what was done wrong, explain why it was done wrong, explain why it shouldn't be done that way, and then explain how it should be done. There's a lot of material in that, and it also lets authors improve over time by knowing what doesn't work. I'm not negative to be an asshole, I point out the negatives so that the authors can then improve, and they often do. When something is done right, all I can really say is that it's good, and then explain how it's better than doing bad things. It's a bit self-explanatory. Regardless, I'll try and list all of the great things that really stood out to me. Off the top of my head, the word choice was absolutely brilliant through most of the story. I thought that was really, really good. It was appealing to read. It flowed very well. It gave us the unknown backstory to a character from the series that is very, very minor, but you wonder about. And it's interesting in that way. It doesn't break canon in any way. We have no reason to believe that didn't happen, really. It's just interesting little flavor to ponder. I didn't think that the use of gore was ever excessive at any point in the story. It is definitely a very gory story when it happens, however, it seemed to all fit fairly well, and was used effectively. And lastly, I don't think the story wasted very much of our time, where it had just as much build-up to everything happening as it needed to have. The author also made a very good ratio of exactly how much should be left up to interpretation and how much should be a mystery, and what specific things should actually be explained. Fear of the unknown and being able to wonder and theorize about the story afterwards is a very important part of creeping people out, just leaving a little bit for them to wonder, but make sure to tell them enough that they aren't just completely confused. All in all, I think this was an absolutely amazing story, and by far one of the best ones I've read on the show. I just think that's really awesome that not only can I read this awesome of a story, but someone wrote it specifically for my show. If you don't go on the forum, you might not know that 95% of the creepypasta I read on my show are written on my forum by fans of the show. This is all stuff you're only gonna see on my channel. But anyway, that's it for this creepypasta. Tune in again next Saturday when we tackle yet another story made and sent by the fans with The Truth of the Princess. If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find a link to the playlist of every creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up on my blog posts, join the Facebook fan page linked below. If you want to support me and what I do, check out the Patreon page in the description. Remember that if you want your story to be read on the show, you must stay active on your post on the forum as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.